Welcome to Politics Chat, in which I try to answer your questions about modern politics. I didn't ask for questions today because my phone shows what people wanted me to talk about today, and that is, of course, the Maine Senate race, where people are talking about me being a candidate in that race. And I wanted you people to hear first that that is not going to happen. That's not an option. I am not a good candidate for the Senate race in Maine. And I'll explain to you why, because there's a larger question here, I think, about political parties and about messaging and about where we're going as we go forward. And first of all, running for elected office is not my skill set. Or rather, running, I think I could probably do, but actually doing the job is a different thing. And that's not a skill set I have. If I had ever wanted to develop the talents of, going through long reports and sitting on committees and figuring out different constituencies and splitting babies and, for the one side or the other in the Solomon sense, I would have done it by now. And I don't want that. And you may have heard me talk in the past about how if I ever did run for office, which I won't rule out entirely, I would run at the state level. I would run for the state legislature because that's how you learn the ropes and that's how you learn how to do it. And I have a real problem with people jumping into a race and saying, "That's it. I'm going to learn as I go" at the Senate level, which is one of the most elite institutions in the world in terms of governance. I'm not saying that nobody can do that. I think if you have significant executive experience, for example, if perhaps you've run a company or, run a university or something, that you could do it and do a good job at it. But I don't have those skills. What I do have is another set of skills that are unique, really. And I'm using them every day in what I hope is a way that is protecting American democracy in a way I really can contribute versus running for a Senate seat for people who would be electing me, knowing that I don't really know how to do the job. So I would not be a good candidate for that position. And I wanted to point that out because one of the things I'm always emphasizing to people is to know your lane, to bring your A game. And I promise you, I bring my A game every day here. And when I write at night and when we do the videos and all that, I really do bring my A game. I never show up on a stage. If anybody's seen me behind a stage before I go on, you will see that I do sort of exercises and stuff to bring energy to the stage. I've always said the day you're not nervous about what you do is the day you should quit because you need to bring your A game all the time. And I would urge everybody to bring their A game. I can't bring an A game to a Senate race. I just don't have those skills. But I wanted to say that because there is, I think, in the Maine race, but across this country, a real revulsion against, on the Democratic side at least, those that are called established politicians. And I want to break that down a little bit, or the establishment, because we need people who know what they're doing. We also need outside voices. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. But the idea that the fact you know what you're doing, that you've worked your way up from your town offices into your state offices into a national office is somehow something to denigrate is, I think, part of that larger attack on expertise in the last, 20 years or so. That's a real problem. I mean, if you look at somebody like AOC in New York City, when she first became a member of Congress, she was very good at articulating a vision. But it has been her working with older, more established members of Congress now for a number of months, years, that has made her a really effective representative. And she's going to get better at that. But that was a skill set she had to learn. I kind of think of it, people may have heard me say this, that I think of it kind of like the whole idea of a rogue elephant. And this may be my entire construction of this idea, and I may have it wrong. So those of you who know about large animals, please give me a pass on this. But as I understand it, one of the real issues for tribes of elephants during the worst of the harvesting of ivory was that it was the old elephants who had the big ivory tusks, and when they were culled out of a herd, the young elephants, the rogue elephants, the young male elephants didn't know where the watering holes were, and so entire groups of elephants would die because all they had to lead them was rogue elephants. And I often think of those of us who are older helping the younger people as being those old elephants with the tusks who are helping the rogue elephants find the water holes. They got to get there on their own, but we got to show them the ropes. And so we need those sorts of people in Congress. We don't need all of them to be that way, but we certainly need some of them. So when people talk about anti-establishment, that in a way seems to me to be a buzzword. What does that even mean? That is, if you look at somebody like Graham Platner, who remains, as of now, the Democratic nominee for the Senate in the state of Maine, he had bucket loads of money from outside the state of Maine, and he was backed by very prominent senators. So is anti-establishment that you do not yourself hold an office? That seems to me to be a pretty low bar. And I'll talk about where I would go with that looking forward. But what I wanted to emphasize about what is happening in Maine and the larger picture here is that we are in a major party realignment. And what that means on the side of the right, the MAGA Republicans, is they have taken over the course of the last 40 years, the Republican Party, which used to stand for a sort of different flavor of the same modern state that Democrats stood for. You know, the idea that the state should regulate business, provide a basic social safety net, promote infrastructure, and protect civil rights, and have invest in the rules-based international order that, for example, protects freedom of the seas, which is vital, as you now know, for world trade since what's happened with the Strait of Hormuz. But they have taken that party and they have run it into a white nationalist / fascist party. They're not going to recover from that. But what that's done is it's left everybody else sort of scrambling for what comes next, because what that's done is it's taken that ideology that the Republicans really imposed on the country after 1981, that idea that government really should promote the concentration of wealth in a very small group of people, with the idea that that wealth could be invested by those people more efficiently than regulation would enable the people to do if they had to worry about government regulations or high taxes or whatever. What that has done is that ideology has really skewed America really far to the right. And now a lot of people across the board are waking up finally. I mean, people like me have been writing against this since the 1980s, finally have woken up and said, this is destroying not only the American middle class, but it's destroying the American dream. It's destroying all the parts of the country that have created stability since World War II and the Depression. But the issue with that now is that we're in really turbulent waters, because the Democratic Party really has fought a holding action against that juggernaut to the concentration of wealth that has moved more than $50 trillion from the bottom 90% to the top 1%. But they fought a holding action, but they haven't really been able to advance their own ideology. And the reason for that is that with the media system the way it was and the political system the way it was, that people who embraced those ideologies didn't win office. And I will never forget when Bernie Sanders first came on the scene as a political figure. As a presidential candidate in 2016, one of my younger graduate students was very high on him. And I was like, oh, would you cut it out? He's a gazillion years old. Why don't you follow somebody younger at least? And she said, tell me who, Heather. Tell me who, because it's people my age and it's people his age. And it really, the light bulb kind of went on for me that the people who spoke like him in states that were not as rural as Vermont had really been culled out of the political system. And I think you're seeing that now with the Democrats, the people who've been in office for a long time tend to be more timid. They tend to be less willing to push an envelope. And you've got the people who are still clinging to the Republicans, as I say, jumping off a cliff. And you've got the majority of people who are registered for a political party not being either Republicans or Democrats. Remember, there are more independents in this country than there are Republicans or Democrats. So the moment has changed. And one of the things that you are seeing across the country, and I actually find it incredibly exciting, is a lot of new people talking in a lot of new ways about what they want from their government. And I'm going to urge you yet again, and I'm going to talk more about this in a second, but I'm going to urge you to remember that when you hear people talking about progressives or democratic socialists and try and make that sound like it's scary, what they are currently demanding is generally to the right of what Republicans wanted in the 1950s. We've gone that far over to the right. You are not hearing in the United States currently calls for truly progressive policies like universal child care, like guaranteed universal basic income, like free college, like many of the things that other developed nations have. Now, maybe some people are saying that, but you're not seeing that get into the mainstream at all now. What you're seeing in the mainstream are, as I say, pretty centrist ideas for the 1950s. And we're calling them progressive or democratic socialist, but they are really pretty much in the mainstream of what people enjoyed 50 years ago, and they are still supported by huge numbers of Americans. So when people call something a progressive idea as if it's somehow far left, and it's supported by 80% of the American people, I have said this in a number of places, how is this anything other than centrist? When you talk about something like making sure everybody has health care, a majority of every political group wants that. So how is that far left? That's, to my mind, centrist if you look at actual numbers. But what this means is you have this choppy water, as I say, people figuring it out. How are they going to, who's the enemy? What are we going to do? How are we going to make alignments? One of the things that bothers me that we are still seeing is we're seeing a group of political consultants who have themselves decided that they know what we want. And this is a particular sticking point, I think, in rural areas. And here I will speak largely for myself. As you know, I live in a rural area. I live in rural Maine. And I think it is my observation, and take this or leave this, I 1,000% could be wrong, but it certainly seems to me, there are many things, by the way, living in a rural area, there are many things that rural people feel they are misunderstood about. And I just don't even start me on the way urban writers portray rural Maine. We sometimes like to joke that they think we are all incestuous and incestuous addicts killing each other. But there is, I think, if you are from away, as we call it, there is this sense that if you are going to appeal to the working man, that what you really need to look at is the kind of jobs they have. That is, you're a truck driver, or you work in mechanics, or you're a fisherman. And by the way, my husband is a lobsterman. But living here, it seems to me that there's actually something that outside consultancy misses. And that's that it isn't actually, at least in Maine, and I can't speak for elsewhere, it does not seem to me to be about authenticity, does not seem to me about the kind of job you have. It's about your work ethic in that job. So you can have a white collar job, be a lawyer or something, although our lawyers here tend to be a little less tightly wrapped, shall we say, than lawyers in big cities. But if you're really putting skin in the game, you're really working hard. the working man, people that an outside consultancy would identify as being that, ever elusive working class voter, respects that. Similarly, you can have a blue collar job and what we would call dub around in it. If there's Mainers listening to me, the word dubbing around. I think that's a Mainism, and you dub around in it. That is, you're not very serious about it. It doesn't matter if you're a truck driver or a fisherman or whatever. It's not respectable. Um, and that the reason that I'm making that point is because it felt to me always like, Graham Platner was chosen by consultants outside, lots of outside money, because it almost felt like he's somebody that if you were from outside, you thought Mainers would respect. And that's not actually, I think, an authentic representation of Maine. And after all, this is a Maine Senate seat. The person elected has to represent the people in Maine. And that that matters, I think, not only locally, and I understand this is incredibly important. I understand how important this seat is, but it also matters that the person actually represents the people in Maine. And the reason that I'm making this deal about I hope it's a clear distinction between the job category versus the work ethic, is because I actually think this speaks in a larger way to democratic messaging going forward. That is one of the terms that I notice we don't talk a lot about anymore, is the concept of the American dream. Or rather, new immigrants talk about it a lot, but political people, especially in the Democratic Party, don't. And there's a lot of fights about what the American dream means, and is there such a thing, and is it attainable, and all that. But if you think about the American dream in the way that it has tended to be defined throughout our history, it was the concept that if you worked hard, you had a fair shot of, usually people defined it as having, as prospering, having a decent home and food on the table, and your kids have a better life than you do. You could also define it in other ways, that you could achieve whatever it is you want. But generally, that achievement was based in the idea of economic success of some sort. And one of the extremely powerful things that the Republican Party did, beginning in the late 60s, early 1970s, and then really taking off in the 1980s, was to take all of the ways in which Republicans and Democrats both had worked to make sure that American dream was attainable for everyone, regardless of their race or their gender or their abilities. By the way, remember, the Republicans in the 1950s are making sure that disabled Americans also have equal access to the resources like education and jobs that other abled people had, so that everybody had access to that American dream. And one of the things that Republicans really started to do, first under Nixon, but really taking off under Reagan, was taking that idea that the goal of the federal government was to make sure people had a level economic playing field so they had access to the American dream, and turned it into the idea that Democrats were giving lazy people a handout so they didn't have to work hard. And I actually think there's a lot in that idea that still matters in rural America. That, people who are working really, really hard, especially in areas of the country that have been left behind economically, don't see this larger concept of a government trying to make the American dream accessible to anybody, certainly not to them. And a lot of the language that was around, I mean, he's still in office, but that was around someone like Platner, but that is certainly around many of the people running, I think, in really interesting ways in this cycle, is about making sure that people have access to the American dream. And by that, I mean, food affordable, gas affordable, education affordable, housing affordable, making sure that people have the opportunity that will enable them to use hard work to get somewhere. And one of the things that, if you start to think about this, one of the things that has broken down in a lot of our political discussions is that when we think about our leadership, and I think this is coming around now, I think we're seeing this come back around, but there's a lot of people, it used to be you worked hard for what you got, and people took pride in the work. And that really began to change. My mother always associated it with Ronald Reagan, who made fun of a Harvard education and kept saying, you don't need an education. Look at me. I'm a C student from Eureka College in California, and how powerful I am. You don't really need that kind of an education. And you've seen that change to the idea that you should be able to get something really easily. Or then finally, we're in this period, in Trump's first term, he talked about how it was all about the best people. Like the best people were just good at it. And that's not what I see. I see a group of people who are bending the rules so they get stuff and the rest of us don't. And now we've gone beyond that to Trump actively fleecing his supporters, that he's clever to cheat on his taxes or to make sure that he's walked away with more than $600 million on those Trump meme coins, while his supporters have lost billions. That's not healthy when you turn from a society that says we're going to build something together and the government is going to make sure we all have a shot, to a few people are going to get everything because they're all buddies, to they're going to literally take it out of our own pockets. So going back to Maine and to the language here, one of the things that I think Platner did incredibly well was really tapped into that fury that some people seem to be getting something for nothing. But rather than doing it in the way that the Republicans have done, saying that that's people of color, women, uh, different genders, different religions, he made it really clear, which is really what's happened since the 1980s, that it's a few really wealthy people who have taken over our system and who are wielding power and influence in a way that makes it, for the rest of us, impossible to achieve the American dream. And what does that mean, though? It means, first of all, the if you look at in Maine, why nobody was doing that in Maine before him, and people were to some degree. Maine's a funny state because if you're doing it right in politics, you should have a really deep bench. And at a national level, the Democrats' bench is unprecedented. The depth of this bench is unbelievable. Really unusual. For how great this bench is. And I think that that's just a reflection of the fact you got all these people who have sort of been kept out of the gate for so long, and now they're getting some running room. But the state of Maine is more difficult than many states are, simply because we don't have a lieutenant governor. And that matters because it means that the power tends to concentrate in the governor, and there is not a lot of people around the governor to sort of start to build the bench. That's okay. You can say you should take people from the legislature, which again, ducky idea. But the legislature in Maine has term limits. So people who start to develop a real political backing get term limited out. And you can go back and forth between the houses, but most people generally don't do that. So what Maine has tended to do is to look for outsiders, to look for people who built their base somewhere outside politics. And that can be really healthy because they aren't really beholden to people. Somebody like Senator Angus King, who's an independent, he began in media. He was a TV news guy. And then, he's a lawyer as well, but that's how he got known here. But you see that people doing that. And that made it easier here, I think, for people to grab hold of somebody who seemed truly to be an outsider, but didn't have any track record and simply was saying the right things. As I say, it's an awfully high profile seat to go for when you don't actually have much of a track record. And that's why Maine was like that. But at the larger level, Um, what the Democrats and the people, and by the way, I'm saying the word Democrat here, and that's just kind of because the option I've got, right? But I actually think you can see the country dividing between the people who are going with Trump and going sort of into that white nationalist, Christian nationalist, MAGA, neo-Nazi political direction. Um, and mind you, neo-Nazis were marching on the 4th of July in Washington. I don't know if you saw that, and Trump has refused to disavow them. And he's the leader of their party. So people who are like, you can't say that, are simply not looking at the facts. But then there's a whole lot of the rest of us who know we don't want that. And we know we want back a stable country in which we feel like if we work hard, we can make it. But we don't really know how to do that and how to make alliances across this whole huge body of people, because we make up at least 75% of the American population, and possibly more than that. Um, we're searching for the right people and the right language to pull people together. And what that means is that if the past is any guide, as we did in the 1850s and the 1890s and the 1930s, first of all, we're going to make some mistakes. We're going to get some absolute wackadoodles. And by the way, we always have wackadoodles in Congress. We always have. It's not a problem unless it's not never good, right? But it's not a problem unless the wackadoodles are calling all the shots. And right now, that's happening on the MAGA party. But we're gonna get it wrong sometimes, for one reason or another. But we will also get it right the majority of the time. And what you are seeing around this country is a whole bunch of new candidates, and sometimes old candidates, sometimes leaving candidates, who are talking in ways that echo the best times in our history. And by best, I don't mean like everyone's having a party, but the time when most people felt that if they worked hard, they could live the kind of life that they wanted to live. And the people I'm talking about now, new candidates, I'm talking about people like Josh Turek in Iowa, who's, when I think about hard work, he's a Paralympian, and it was one gold medals in, I don't remember, basketball maybe. That's really, really hard work. And one of the things you look for in politics is people who know how to put in the time, know how to put in the effort. And he's a guy who has done that, undergone tons of surgeries I think he had spina bifida because his father was Agent Orange during Vietnam. And the first time I saw him, he was literally dragging his wheelchair up staircases to knock on doors. He talks about making sure that everybody has the kind of opportunity that they need to become whatever they want to be. And mind you, the kind of guts that somebody like him shows is really unusual. And I always in my mind compare it to Madison Cawthorn, who was the Republican candidate he was representative from, I think, North Carolina. I can't remember now, but he used to say, oh, I was going to go into the Paralympics. And everybody was like, we don't even know who you are, because that would be rather like me suddenly saying to you all, I'm going to kayak across the Atlantic. I mean, I'm a pretty good kayaker for 4 miles at a pop, but I could no more undertake something truly hard than Madison Cawthorn could be a Paralympian without years and years and years and years of hard work. So you're seeing people like Josh Turek, you're seeing people like Rob Sands in Iowa, you're seeing people like, and I'll pick on the middle states first. Jason Crow, Colorado, he's already in Congress. Tina Smith, Minnesota, she's leaving Congress. She's a senator, which is damn shame. She's really smart. But they're literally talking about their big thing is breaking up the monopolies that make it impossible for farmers to hold on to their land, and for entrepreneurs to get into the economic system, and for people to get educations, and crucially for people to have health care. That's not all their policies, but they're calling that prairie populism. But then you have somebody like Scott Colomb down in Mississippi who's running against Cindy Hyde-Smith. He's saying the same thing. He's saying, listen, we got to have health care. We got to have a say in our government. We got to be able to vote. We got to be able to make it possible for people to be treated equally before the law, because otherwise we can't have any option, any ability to get to a place where we can live a stable, healthy life. And then you also have people in the urban cities, people who are increasingly calling themselves or being called democratic socialists. Now, again, I just read a long thing today about dividing out all the different pieces of democratic socialism. And I look at it and I think, okay, that's fine. But what those of us who are on the outside of it see is the same sort of impulse: healthcare, transportation, housing, just the basics, so that we can work hard and better ourselves, get to a place where we really want to be. And I got to say, one of the things I haven't said anywhere and that I haven't really seen people embracing is, for people like me, infrastructure, man. I need, and people around me need, cell coverage. I don't have cell coverage. It's 2026. Like, this is bonkers, right? But where I'm going with this is that we're throwing these ideas together. And one of the packaging pieces, I think, that really pushes back against the Republican idea that a government that protects equal rights, or that invests in roads and schools and hospitals and bridges, or that regulates business so that data centers can't take all our energy and all our water and pollute, both with noise and with toxic waste. They're looking at these pieces, and a government, by the way, that protects freedom of the seas and protects this international rules-based order, and certainly makes sure we are equal before the law. That sort of a government is not stealing from us to give people free stuff. It is trying to create a level playing field so that all of us can work hard and prosper. And that strikes me as being the common denominator between the kind of messaging that someone like Graham Platner used and the larger growing democratic message. So where does that leave us, both in Maine and in the country at large? So first of all, I'm seeing all over social media, Platner fans are fighting with anti-Platner people, and so on and so forth. And I will point out, as political consultants have been saying since the beginning, and as people like me have been saying since the beginning, and as pollsters have been saying since the beginning, Platner was always going to be a heavy lift. And you know that because he is running significantly behind where he should be. That is Maine, and I'm not going to get the numbers exactly right. Actually, that's not true. I will. I've got them right here. I pulled them up here. Maine right now is running or Maine generally is D+8. That is, Democrats should do 8 points better than Republicans in the state of Maine anyway. And then people are so mad at the Republicans that there's an extra 7 points on that. So anybody running in the state of Maine should be running D+15. Platner was running D+2. So he was 13 points below where he should have been. So he was always a heavy lift. And the thing for people to be watching now, everybody to be watching now and working at now, is recognizing that the enemy is not whoever your neighbors supported or you supported. What I want to see is getting rid of Susan Collins, who is the Republican and who has not supported this idea of a level economic playing field, has not supported the idea of defending equal rights. I mean, her vote on Kavanaugh was crucial to getting him on the court, and there went Roe versus Wade, which took away people's ability to plan their families and to get medical care for pregnancies, whether successful or not. She is also the Republican chair of the Appropriations Committee, who rolled over and played dead when the Trump administration clawed back all kinds of money that the Congress had actually appropriated. and said that they thought the American people should have. And Trump and Elon Musk just said no, and Russell Vought said no, we're not going to do that. And rather than pitching a conniption fit as she ought to have, they just let that happen. They just watched the administration walk all over Congress. So replacing her in a D15 moment strikes me as being the place where we all should be standing. And as I say, I think actually replacing somebody who was only D+2 at this moment is actually a fabulous opportunity, rather than something for people to be saying, oh, we've lost this race. To the contrary, it looks like it might be a more successful race than it was before. But that being said, it's going to depend on messaging going forward and recognizing that this is not about slicing and dicing those of us who are not part of MAGA. It's about saying, you know what? We got at least 6 fabulous candidates for the Maine State Senate. And you know what? I don't like everything that all of them says. And I suspect you don't either. Don't like their positions entirely. And I suspect you don't either. But this is not about finding the perfect candidate, because there is no such thing. The whole point of governance is you have to make compromises, even if you don't like those compromises. And I have absolutely no idea what the Maine Democratic Party is doing. But whatever they do, they will be doing because they are hoping to win that seat. And I'm already seeing people saying, oh, it's just going to be the establishment. And it's like, what does that even mean? I mean, the Democratic Party in the state of Maine is Democrats in the state of Maine, and the different organizations that will raise money for them. So I think throwing up your hands at this point and saying nobody's going to be good enough is the wrong thing to do. I'll come out and say it that way. And just so you know, I think I know everybody who is, or have worked with everybody who currently has their hat in the race, and they're good people. You know, they're good. I don't agree with all of them on everything. I don't agree with all politicians on. There's no politician on whom I agree about everything. But none of them is a bad option. And this idea that somehow we should throw our hands up over a 6-year race, when I will point out that the next Congress is going to have Supreme Court seats to fill, is a fool's errand. Now is the time to find a candidate, whoever it is, unless that person has disqualifying characteristics, although I just can't imagine that's going to happen a second time, famous last words, and get behind that person. Because in addition to everything that I've just outlined here, we're all looking at the state of Maine, which, by the way, everybody should, because it's the best state in the union. Just saying. For those of you who don't know, I live here, and I'm kidding, mostly. Trump's a mess, right? Mitch McConnell is I'm not going to put in an adjective there. We don't know what has happened to Mitch McConnell. The fact that today so many people came out and said they had just held a 20-minute conversation with him suggests that he is not in good shape. That was completely unbelievable as far as I was concerned. I don't know if you saw it, but just before I came live, the U.S. began bombing again. Bombing quite seriously in Iran, because Trump says he's mad that they have been hitting vessels trying to leave the Strait of Hormuz. There's a big fight over this because there's at least 2 routes through the Strait of Hormuz. Iran wants vessels to be using the passageway closest to Iran. And the U.S. has been encouraging people to go closer to Oman, and so the Iranians have been firing on those vessels, and now the U.S. has started bombing Iran again, which is, I mean, I've talked about this till I'm blue in the face. There's no good way out of this war, but bombing again at this point seems more than a little counterproductive. Just saying. And at the same time, Trump is in Turkey, at a meeting of NATO where he has been insulting all of our former allies, once again insisted he should have Greenland and Canada, and then completely has devolved into, I don't even know if I'm going to write about it tonight. What he is saying is just gibberish. And by the way, if you want to look this up, you can go to YouTube, type in Trump in Turkey or whatever. You don't have to listen to it. If you go down in the the blurb that they have about the video, there is a little place where it says transcript. And if you click on that, this is always gets me until I figured it out. The transcript doesn't appear there. It appears way over on the far right top of the screen, and you can just read what he says. You can just scroll through it. And then if you want to listen to it, you can click on it and it automatically goes to that part of the video. But I've just done that for Turkey, so it's up there. So if you're ever wondering what's really going on and you see a clip in the news and you think, oh, that can't be real, you can always do that, and you can always check yourself, and lots of different people put up the same clip. They all have cameras, and so you can find this stuff out. So the fact that we're looking at Maine and people are so absorbed in Maine is sort of interesting, because I think it is a microcosm of this larger change going on in American politics and in the desperate attempt of those people who are accustomed to calling the shots in politics to determine what the future is going to look like. And where I'm going to leave you with this is that I don't think this moment is about consultants. And I don't think this moment is about people who've run our system for the last 40 years. I think their knowledge is very important. But this moment is about us. It's about the people. And, the idea that somehow we can find the magic person in Maine who's going to make everything right again misses the entire point. The Maine Senate race is not about finding, somebody is talking about drafting an actor. It's not about finding a face. It's not about finding somebody who seems to check the boxes. It's about the people of Maine, but across the country, the people of America saying, darn it, this is what we want. And this is the messaging that we want. These are the things we want. And that might mean, a person who is just starting out, a bartender from New York, or it might mean an 80-year-old lawyer in Massachusetts, or however old Ed Markey is. I probably slandered him. He's probably younger than that. We don't know. Me sitting here, I can't say to you, here's the perfect person. But they want a certain kind of skill set. You want them to believe in a level playing field, a level economic playing field, a level racial playing field. You want them to believe in a level playing field so that everybody can work hard and get to a place they want to be. And even if you don't feel like that's important to you, you want that for the stability of society so you can do whatever you want to do. You want them to believe in that, and you want them to care deeply about their constituents. You want them to be able to work with a group of people, that they are not mavericks who can't get anything passed. I mean, we certainly have, look at people like Jim Jordan. He's been in government forever. He's never gotten anything passed. That's a waste of oxygen, right? You want to have somebody who's out there doing the work to get things through. And you want people who have a vision for the future that stabilizes the country. And if you think about it, that the people who are disappointed in Platner, or who are still supporting Platner or whatever, you're not really looking for a person. People come and go. And it'd be great, right, if we get another FDR or we get another Lincoln. That'd be great. And I'm holding out for that someday. But what matters is the message. What matters is the government. What matters are the themes and the movement. The individual people in it, if we do it right, people won't remember us, because there'll be so many of us thinking the same thing, that this will be the water we swim in. And that's what we're looking for. The people who are doing it, not because of the fact they want power. There's some people in Congress I've never understood. Like, why would you have that much power and not use it for good? I'll stop. You want it for people who want to use their power for others. and they want to create a nation that is doing the best it can for the most of its people and who is working to solve problems around the world. And if we put enough of those people in office, whether they're, you know, whatever their backgrounds are, whatever they look like, whatever ages they are, whatever they are, who they are is not going to matter. It's not about them, it's about the mission. And that, I think, if you look at all these people with Susan Collins at a 17% approval rating, you think about it that way, this becomes a really, really doable race. If you'd like to tune in live, I record these chats on Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Maine time on both my YouTube channel and my Facebook page. If you want to hear more from me, I write Letters from an American every night. It's available on Substack and on Facebook, and the audio version of the nightly letter is available the following day wherever you get your podcasts. And finally, on Saturday mornings, I talk with Dr. Joanne Freeman, the historian of the early republic, professor, and dear friend about history and politics. We call our talks What the Heck Just Happened, and you can find them on YouTube. Politics Chat is produced by Lauren Westfall, music by Andrea Von Kampen.